book as well. So yeah, thank you everyone, and over to you, Howard and Merrill.
Debs, won't you just go back to Merrill's LinkedIn profile?
Sure. Here we go.
Okay. So this is certainly my sort of interaction with Merrill has been around a lot of these, those LinkedIn expert answers. And you can see that Merrill's got top data governance, top data management, quality, data architecture. And I think you can only display one at a time. Have you got any more than that, Merrill, or is that the set?
Yeah, you can only display one at a time. So I
Yeah,
chose data
yeah,
governance because I like that one the most.
right.
But I did get a total of 4.
Great.
And I understand they're getting rid of those as of, I think, December 7th.
Oh, I didn't
So
know that.
I'll probably drop them off my profile, but we'll
Okay,
see.
okay. Yeah, so certainly if anyone is interested, I know that Merrill contributes a lot to those expert answers, and I don't know how many of you are aware of it, but they basically create an article, a lot of the times using AI that generates the articles, and then they ask for contributions, and they actually allocate the top voice per article, and Merrill's normally at the top of the list. So lovely to have you, and really looking forward to the book. Those are the 2 books that Merrill has, and I think today we'll be talking on crimes against data, and it's the same as with the other authors. We would love to have you engaging. I know Merrill would like to have a lot more discussions today, and for a person who has maybe the best engagement or the most insightful comments, we'll award a prize to you at the end. Merrill, are you with Steve Hoberman's publishing? Or
Yes. Yes.
okay,
Technics published. Yeah.
Technics Pub. Right, great. So what we have been able to do is to get the other authors to actually sign the book to the winner with their name. So we'll take you through that process. So thank you very much once again. Thank you.
Right. Yeah, so let me get started just introducing myself a little bit more. I'm a data person through and through. I haven't, been doing something else and then decided, oh, data's kind of cool. Let me just, switch careers and do that. Pretty much from the beginning, I've done data.
Right.
So I have a Bachelor of Math from University of Waterloo, and that's where it started. And if that sounds strange to people, it's because it's the only place in the world where you can get a Bachelor of Math. I don't have a Bachelor of Science or Bachelor of Arts majoring in math. It's actually a Bachelor of Math. And because of that, there was an awful lot of specialization right from the start. So I learned about data management at school. I learned how to do data modeling at school. I didn't learn it from a vendor class. So I call it the most pure way to learn. When I graduated, I did what we all did with a Bachelor of Math degree. I was a programmer analyst. And while it wasn't really my dream, I say that it gives me street cred. Because when you're programming, you're using data, you're seeing problems in the data, and you don't really have a way to fix it. So I only did that for a couple of years, and then I got a job data modeling, which is really what I was more interested in doing. And so I did a lot of data modeling, and then from there I naturally got into data architecture. And then I was working at Deloitte when the term data governance came along. And Deloitte didn't do a lot of data modeling, so I always said I had the oddest assortment of projects, but I guess in a way it kind of made me well-rounded. But when data governance came along, people looked at me and said, well, it's got data in it, this is probably your thing, figure it out. And so I really was there in the beginning. And I can look back at some of the things we did in the beginning. I don't exactly do all of those things now. Things have evolved. But you're there from the beginning, helping companies figure out what they need to do with governance, what it really means to them. And you're seeing the way different companies need to implement it because, everyone does things a little differently. So that's what I've done a lot of. I've worked in data quality. I've worked in metadata. As I said, architecture, some privacy. But to me, data governance really pulls it all together, which is what I really enjoy doing. So, another thing I was doing was I was seeing things happen in my daily life, like crazy things happen with, with the way people were treating data. And I would talk to friends and say, I won't believe what happened to me today. And if I'm talking to the right people, they're like, oh yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about. And I reached the point where I was seeing so many of these things. I thought, I'm just really going to get, some of my friends are just going to get so tired of hearing from me. And I decided to start posting these little stories to LinkedIn because I was seeing a lot of people facing the same problems. It's a data problem, and yet companies aren't really recognizing that it's a data problem. So I thought if we can tell these stories, that can really help get that point across. And sometimes people don't necessarily realize how impactful something can be. Like they can think, okay, we don't have an address for a customer, big deal. They're not going to get the marketing material we send them. We can take that hit for one customer. But it's probably never one customer. You've probably got a bigger data quality problem. And what if you're not talking about marketing material? What if you're sending a shipload, a truckload of perishable products out to a customer? You don't have a good address. So you've got the truck driver driving around realizing this address doesn't even exist. And now they're trying to reach head office, figure out where do I drop off this product? And if it can't be reached, then, maybe they have to just go back to the warehouse and you've, maybe reached the time limit for this product and it's spoiled. So you could potentially lose a lot of money just from one incident like that, and all because of a bad address. So you really need to understand, the implications of what you're doing. So I was doing that for a while, and then I was also writing, and I was writing some articles about data management, and I thought, you know what, every time I want to refer back to something, I'm opening a few files, I'm just going to copy paste them into one file. I can easily refer back to them. And pretty much as soon as I did that, it escalated and my fate was known from there, and I was writing a book. And so I was working on this book, and then I thought, you know what, I think it's kind of heavy. These little stories that I'm putting on LinkedIn, maybe I'll add these stories to the book. And I started doing that, but I realized there's just way too many stories. So I decided this has to be its own book. So Crimes Against Data became the first book I published, even though I actually started writing the second book first. So for those of you who haven't seen them, Crimes Against Data, kind of a fun picture on the front. And then the second one is Stop the Data Madness.
Thank you.
So the first time I started using Crimes Against Data, I blame a large national retailer. So what happened was I was in the store trying to do self-checkout, just waiting my turn in line. And there was this woman who was like almost done. So I'm kind of watching her, waiting for my turn. And she had 2 packages of hangers, bunch of white hangers, bunch of blue hangers. And she holds them up to the employee who's nearby. And she says, are these the same, or do I have to swipe them separately? And the employee said, no, they're the same. And I'm thinking, they're not the same. Yeah. They may look the same, same type of hanger, same manufacturer, same package size, but the color was different. And so by not swiping them each, they just messed up inventory. But she got done.
Yeah.
I got to check out.
Yeah.
And then a couple of weeks later, I'm back at the same store, same line, waiting for self-checkout. Different people involved, but I like to say in my head, they were the same people. And now this woman has a cartload of cases of Coke, and I can't see what's in there. I don't know if they're all Coke, if they're Diet Coke, Sprite, whatever. And she says to the employee, "Do I have to swipe these separately?" And the employee says, "Well, if they're all the same thing, they're all Coke, you're fine. But if they're all different, like Coke and Diet Coke, you do have to swipe them separately." And I'm thinking, yes, inventory is going to be right.
Mm.
And when I was talking to a friend afterwards, I said, I returned to the scene of the data crime, and they did not commit another crime. And I was just being fun, but after I said that, I said, you know what, this is all about crimes against data. So that retailer is the reason that I came up with the term, and it's been kind of fun. So what's in the book? There are crimes that I've seen committed. I'd like to say I have not committed any crimes. I mean, maybe I have in my life.
Right.
I will kind of give myself that. But the crimes in the book are things I've either witnessed, or they haven't all been about me. Sometimes things have made the news. There have definitely been some things nationally or globally that have been pretty big. So stories like that that are in there. So what I tried to do in the book was I also organized them. So if you were to look at the book, I'll just kind of pull up the table of contents. There's a bunch of crimes about addresses. There's a bunch of crimes against names, accounts, business rules, and pandemic data, because I wrote this. I guess I probably started writing it during the pandemic. There were an awful lot of data crimes during the pandemic.
Yeah.
I think people were just going crazy. I kind of made a list of a couple of things that I might want to talk about. So when we talk about crimes against data, some of them are about the way we're handling data. We're mishandling it. We're not treating it correctly. And other times, the data is correct. I mean, we've stored it properly, and then the problem is the way we use it. Becomes our fault. We've taken something good and we've turned it into bad. So it can kind of go wrong. I say from an operational perspective or from an analytical perspective. Kind of what we're choosing to do with it. With names, if you follow me on LinkedIn, you'll see that sometimes I post about what's in Merrill's mailbox today, because sometimes it's just an adventure, opening my mailbox and seeing what I've got. So my name is Merrill Albert. My first name and my last name could be first names, they could be last names. And sometimes companies decide, I don't care what name she gave me, I'm going to change it. So sometimes I open my mailbox and I've got things addressed to Merrill Albert, to Albert Merrill, to Mr. Merrill Albert, Mr. Albert Merrill. It's just an adventure what's in there. And I haven't figured out what exactly they're doing to my data. I do know that there are some tools out there where you can evaluate names and say, okay, this is high probability, this is a female name, or high probability, this is a male name. So I think they're kind of doing that. But, at the same time, if this is your customer, why would you decide, I don't know what salutation to use, so I'm just going to guess? Why do we decide it's appropriate to guess at data? And when you're guessing at something like a salutation, you're turning off your customer right from the start. I don't have an interest in dealing with companies like that. And it's worse when I get something like that from a data management tool vendor. I mean, that's happened before. So not really a tool that I would be interested in purchasing.
Yeah.
But that's one of the things that they've done. So one of the things, I guess another story would be about driver's licenses, and there's another story about license plates. So I once had to do a background check, and have to enter certain information, and there's usually a place to put in driver's license. So I'm putting in my driver's license. The first thing it asks for is the state, so I put that in, and then I put in the driver's license, and it said that's an invalid number. So I'm sitting there with my driver's license card and, looking at, what I entered, and it's like, no, I entered it correctly. And then I tried again, and I thought, okay, maybe those aren't zeros, maybe they're O's. And I tried that. And that didn't work either. And I tried a few things and eventually just gave up. But this company needed this background check done, so I had to solve the problem. So I do a quick little Google search, and I find out that this particular state had changed its driver's license formats. I think they were like a length of 7, and they had changed them to 8. I guess they just had so many people in the state. And so this was a transitional period. They were accepting both 7 and 8, and mine was not what the program had been coded for. So it was rejecting my driver's license. So I then wound up having to go to the company, not just say, oh, I can't do the background check, but I had essentially debugged their problem for them. And then they had to figure out, okay, how are we going to get around this so that we can get this background check done? And there was something that they were able to do manually, or maybe they just decided, hey, she did all the background work for us. She must be okay. I'm not completely sure which. So in that particular case, you've got this company who has said, you know what, we're going to build some intelligence into our program. Once you enter the state, we know what the rules are for that state, so we can validate that we're getting a valid ID number. And I actually like that approach because you're checking your data quality at your source. You're not letting bad data in. The problem that they had is they were using business rules that were valid at a certain point in time, but they didn't monitor that that the business rules were changing, and then they needed to update their program. So, I usually say, if you're going to build something based on business rules, you have to monitor those rules. And if you don't hear that something has changed, at least do a yearly audit. Has anything changed in our business rules that we missed throughout the year? So, build that into your plan. I usually put it on my calendar. I maybe stagger which rules I'm going to check each month. So something like that. License plates, some similar things happen with those. I don't know about other countries, but I know within the US, license plates rules are based on state. They're not national. So every state can decide what the license plate should look like. And some states say the license plate is unique for the entire state. And some say it depends on the number and the type of plate. So for instance, some states might say, okay, we've got passenger vehicles, we've got vintage vehicles, we have boats, we've got trailers, and some people are obsessed with license plate numbers. and maybe they want to keep that license plate number on every type. And not all states do that. So the problem happens, and this one has been in the news a fair bit. You've got someone who goes to another state where they have tolls, and those toll booths are now, I think, pretty much everywhere. They've gotten rid of the humans, and they just have a camera recording who is going through this toll. And then, you get a bill in the mail. And so sometimes people are getting bills and they're looking at the bill and saying, okay, well, that is my license plate number, but not the right type. And so, there was one guy I know of, he had a motorcycle, but unfortunately he had the same number as someone who had a much bigger vehicle. And the guy with the bigger vehicle, he was going to this other state a couple times a year on vacation. And so this guy with the motorcycle knew, oh, he's gone on vacation again, because he starts getting the bills. And so he has to go down to the state office, pretty much present his motorcycle to show, hey, look, this is the same number, but if you notice, this is a motorcycle plate as opposed to what you sent me, which is a truck plate. And the state really didn't have a solution for him other than telling him to get a new plate. And apparently that isn't easy either. So they were trying to turn it into his problem, and he's trying to get them to take responsibility for what they did.
Sure.
So, things like that, we sometimes encounter. Personally, it hasn't happened to me, but yeah, I'm just kind of waiting for something like that to happen. I'm sure it will. So for anyone who's read the book, do you have a favorite data crime that you want to talk about or hear more about?
Merrill, I've actually got your table of contents up on the screen. So I have it within Kindle. And so if anyone would like to see some of them, I'm happy to share. What I did want to ask you was, it sounds like this is a really nice way of doing executive awareness discussions about, talking about how simple little things affect the quality of the data and affect the customer. Do you use this in business discussions and trying to explain to them that they need to pay attention? Is that an approach you've used in your books and your stories?
Yeah, I have. And some people do use that term data storytelling, or telling stories with data. I sometimes either one. And I think that's important because sometimes people get told you need to manage your data better, and particularly if it's a regulated environment, maybe
Right.
they got an audit where they, failed the way that they were handling data. But you don't want to just get into data management because someone tells you you should, or, it's a, really good idea to do. You really need to understand why you're doing it. And, these are all stories that have happened. And a lot of companies have probably had some very similar things. I probably recognize it maybe a little more than other people, but when I'm seeing a problem and now I'm on a call with customer service and trying to explain to them what I know happened, why are they waiting until their customer calls and says that there's a problem? Why are they not finding it before something goes to production?
Right.
Or why don't they have a way to deal with it? Sometimes it's companies I don't have a choice. I have to work with them. Maybe they're the utility company.
Right.
I have had problems with utility company.
Yeah.
But other times I've got a choice and I can walk away. I'd like to give them a chance to solve their problem, point out what happened.
Right.
But but yeah, I mean, the customer should not be finding the problem. So yeah, when I'm talking to executives, I do try to talk about some of these stories that I sometimes haven't heard them say that they have yet, but I know that they must because they're just so prevalent.
Thank you. Craig, I saw your hand go up, and then you put it down. I'm not sure if you still have a question. Yes. You're on mute, Craig.
Sorry, thanks, Howard. Yeah, Merrill, I was just curious, what would you say is the most common data crime that you come across in your data life?
Ooh. Hmm. Well, I think maybe I would generalize and just say that it's not using the data properly. Like if you manage the data properly, you can trust what's in the database. I mean, there are definitely times when, people don't manage it properly. And then, yeah, you definitely should question everything. But if it's managed properly, you should be trusting it. And I've seen, so many cases where people take this data and they don't use it properly. Something as simple as a customer. If you ask a company how many customers they have, they'll probably give you 5 different answers because it depends on where they're getting that information from. One database might have customer represented a certain way, and another database has it another way. Do you count customers that have bought from you in the past 5 years or have bought from you, sometime since the beginning of time? Are those both equal customers? So, people not really recognizing what they have, or, like I have so many problems with my name. Like if someone wants to make up a salutation because they think, it's a proper way to address someone, we'll add a salutation, even though we don't have it in our database. Is that really a good idea to guess at that? Yeah, so sometimes it's just making up data. So I think sometimes there are business rules. If you talk to the business, you don't just say to them, so what are your business rules? Because they don't talk that way. But if you're able to pull those things out of them by talking through some of these stories, then you can see, okay, what the right business rules are that we should be using. And the business might say, well, yeah, I'd kind of like to use a salutation, but if we don't have one, don't guess at it. I mean, if we get it later because we've asked the customer, how would you like us to address you? Then we can add it to the database, but we don't need to just go making it up.
Thanks so much.
Craig. Anything else, Craig?
I was wondering what the worst crime Merrill's come across.
Right. The biggest impact crime.
I guess worst is a broadly defined term, but that's probably a good way of defining it. Or the biggest impact crime that you've come across.
So there was a big one, and I don't know how big it was. And I'm not actually sure anyone really cared, but I cared. It was the 2020 US Census.
Oh.
And it actually didn't make the news, although I maybe should have made it part of the news. So what happened was every 10 years, there's a census in the US, and there was one in 2020. So I get this census form in the mail, and you can fill it out online. So I just go online, enter the ID number, do all my census stuff, and I think, okay, I'm done. And then a couple weeks later, I get something else in the mail. Again, you know, we need you to do your census. And I'm thinking, well, a couple weeks have passed, so they should have recognized that I've already answered all of their questions. You know, it's not something that kind of crossed in the mail. And I took another look at it and I realized it actually was slightly different. So I had an address that was kind of long, kind of a long street name. And they had abbreviated it one way on one form and another way on the other form. And there's also two valid city names. So one had one city name, the other had the other city name, and they had different IDs. They were both valid addresses, same address. But once I saw that they had different ID numbers, and I realized, okay, they're recognizing these as two separate addresses. And it can't possibly be that mine was an isolated case. It was probably my entire street, maybe my entire city had these duplicates. And this is just one city. So this is probably all over the country. And it was 2020, right? You know,
Wow.
Who wants a census worker knocking on their door during a pandemic? So I contacted the government department to explain what had happened. And at first I didn't get a response, but then I kept getting letters from them, and they were just like really escalating and talking about how it's a crime not to fill out the census form. And I'm thinking, this is not my problem.
Yeah.
So I kept contacting them, and you know, finally they just kind of said, okay, we got it. You know, but someone is probably going to be visiting you anyway.
Oh.
And they either didn't come or I wasn't home when they came. But, you know, when you think about what that means, it probably wasn't just me. I just don't know what percentage of duplicates, and not exactly duplicates, I kind of call them similars, because it really was the same address. It was just represented a little differently. But those census numbers are going to be used for things like education and social services, how many representatives you get in government. And as a family genealogist, it's going to be used in 72 years for genealogy work.
Yeah.
And you know, we can't count on it. And I highly doubt that they changed the programming for 2020. So how many other census have been wrong? So that one could have been a big impact, but I doubt we'll ever know how big the impact was.
Yeah, it's a tricky
And
one.
I remember at the time there was a lot of there was an awful lot of ads on TV telling us, you know, make sure you fill out your census form. It's so important. And the state was actually really worried that we were going to lose a seat in Congress. And I thought, well, you know, if we all just go ahead and fill out both instead of just one, maybe we've done our part for keeping our seat in Congress. And we did keep our seat.
Wow.
So I don't know what happened there, but yeah, that one was potentially a big deal, but yeah, just don't know how big.
And it goes to a discussion around the business key on the citizen data. So is the business key your social security number, or is the business key your address?
Yeah, so social security number, it's supposed to be unique. I know there was a big deal a number of years ago where they discovered it wasn't unique.
Right.
And as much as a lot of companies use it as unique ID, it really shouldn't be used. I think they probably worked out the issues, but you know, at the same time, it's definitely considered private data. And most companies really don't need it.
Right.
So a lot of times when companies ask for it, people don't even bother giving it. And the address, which is what they're using for the census information. I mean, I don't even know how they got that wrong. I haven't been able to figure out what they did, because you would think that from, like, if they had used data from, say, the tax assessor's office,
right.
That would have been unique. So apparently they didn't use that. So I don't know what they did, but they seem to have gotten their data from two different sources and didn't do any job in reconciling it.
And they don't seem to have checked that against any form of geolocation address list. They just seem to be working on their own list.
Yeah, yeah.
Great. Adam, I see your hands up.
Yeah, hi. I think a lot of the things are issues because people don't think or test properly through it. So I think the examples, I mean, they're fun to read and see that it's not just yourself that see, or myself that see them. And they're also, these kind of concrete examples are very useful to explain to people why they should care about what they're putting into systems and how they use it. And I always find personally that dates become big issues, dates, especially coupled with spreadsheets. And getting the months and the days reversed or unclear, and then how do you interpret which is the correct one afterwards if it's been entered in a way that you suspect is wrong.
Yeah, it's an interesting one, Adam, because I was in America and our dates are not the right, the month and the day is reversed. And I was on a motorbike and a policeman stopped me and he said, your license has expired. And I said, but it hasn't expired. But he just said, it's no ways. He said, there's no ways that this could be the right month or day. So I think it was about an hour. It took us about an hour to convince him that our date and month was different. So we sat there on the side of the road trying to work out. He was trying to work out whether we were lying or not. But
yeah, I mean that's one of the big problems with dates. I prefer year, month, day.
Yeah.
Because I'm Canadian, but I live in the US now, and Canada and the US even do it differently.
Right.
And for me to try to keep straight, okay, is month first, is month second? I really don't know. But if I use year, month, day, and it's easy math, if I want to figure out the difference between two dates, I mean, that seems to be the way to go. But every once in a while, I'm using Excel and it does something crazy to the date that I've got. And if I'm not careful, you know, I've messed up.
Yeah, I think in South Africa, we just about every time we load dates, it generally works against the US format, and we constantly get errors, and you have to then go using the locale and things like that. So quite a story, and the decimal point as well. We have the same problem there. But there's a question from Francesco. He's raised two issues. The first one is a query that duplicates numbers, and I was quickly going through your stories, and I was wondering, I saw things like trends not being there, but I haven't seen this situation where the grain or the joins are wrong. Is that something that you've got in here somewhere, or?
No, I don't think I have that in there. I mean, I definitely have stories about people ignoring, I'd say ignoring missing data.
Right.
So for instance, if you were trying to do some research on your customers and maybe the gender, so maybe you're looking at are we marketing differently to different genders? Have we got a good representation of both genders? And, a lot of times people aren't necessarily willing to give you that information. So you may be looking at your data, and if you're not pulling, all of the data out, and you're not choosing those customer records where gender is blank, then, you're missing some of your customers. You're only looking at the ones that chose to give you that information. And, sometimes the people who choose to not give you the information, there's a very good reason why they're choosing to, in effect, exclude themselves from certain information. And you're just, not taking, you're just not understanding what data you've got. So you're not using it properly.
Yeah, I know that Francesco has written a book on the unified star scheme, and he talks about all the traps that you fall into. And this is, certainly one that I've fallen into, where when you do the joins and against dimensions that aren't structured properly or whatever it is, you find these duplicate ones coming out. Francesca, anything else from
when people sometimes ask me, well, should I do an inner join, an outer join? What should I do? And I'm like, you need to do the right join that answers your business question.
Right.
And if your business question is about, I need to understand all of my customers, then you can't exclude the ones where there's, a null in a certain field. You have to recognize that null actually means something.
Yeah. Francesco, anything from your side? Any comments?
Well, yeah, for sure. Data traps are not always easy to detect. Yeah, to me, when I saw the title of your book, The Crimes Against Data, I said, oh, maybe she's speaking about the data traps, because that's actually my experience. I have worked in so many projects where I was working once for a company, an American company based in Europe, and they claimed that in Europe they had 120 million clients, which may be possible, but it was monster.com. So it means that it was a company where you put your CV online. And I said, really? You think, in Europe there are 400 million people. You think that one person every 3 or 4 has put the CV online? So either my grandmother or my aunt has the CV online, because there's not enough people. And it turned out that it was a fan trap. So they were joining 2 tables that were creating a duplication of numbers. And I've seen that happening so many times. And I noticed that in most cases, when I put that to the attention to other people, they even don't accept that it's a problem, or they say, okay, make an inner join or put distinct. And I say, no, that would not change the problem. An inner join will not solve the problem. A distinct will not solve the problem. Just the way you're making the query is incorrect. So your data, your original data is correct, but the way you join the tables creates the duplication. That's, to me, the biggest crime.
Yeah, and also in that case, you've probably got people who can change their email address over time. So maybe they had something in Monster, and then years later they're looking for a job, and they sign up again under a different email address, forgetting that they had it before. So you've got the same person, but now a couple times.
Sure.
Yeah.
Great. Anything else from your side, Francesco, that you'd like to share?
Well, yeah, the categories to me are 2: duplication and loss. So the one that Meryl was saying earlier was she was more focusing about the loss. So when you're joining 2 tables, you can either duplicate data or lose some data, and that's the case of left join, inner joins. So that's the 2 big families. And of course, you can have dirty data that affects everything, but that's a mistake in the data itself. Well, to me, it's important to make a distinction between data that is natively wrong, and people say garbage in, garbage out, which is a phrase I don't really love. But the other thing is data that is natively correct, and the way it gets queried is wrong. Or sometimes you do receive data that is already duplicated because it's already the result of a illegal join, a join that has created duplicates of additive numbers. And you say, okay, but that's my native data. And I say, okay, you should go back to the people who gave you that data and tell them, I suspect that behind this denormalized table, there is an illegal join. So you not only you need to be careful yourself about what you do, but also in some cases, you should go back to the people, to your data providers. Sometimes they are selling you this data, and you should say, hey, listen, I've seen a pattern in your data. I see repetitions. It looks like the result of a bad join. But again, it's goes back to diplomacy. People will be pissed off at you.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I worked one place where we had an analyst who was convinced we had bad data. And I hadn't heard anything about any data issues. I went back to our vendor. Did we get all the data we were supposed to? Were there any problems? And, you know, we were convinced that everything was fine with the data. But this person had seen a drop in sales, an unusual drop in sales. And you know, he basically told everyone who would listen that there was a problem with the data, you know, don't trust it. And we wound up having to launch a very expensive investigation into what was going on with the data, if there truly was a problem. And it turned out there wasn't really a problem with the data. It was all accurate. It had all been loaded. It was all there. And if the person had really done his due diligence, he would have seen that, yes, sales had dropped in the area that he was looking, but sales had increased comparably in other areas. And what was going on was there had been a massive hurricane, and it had destroyed certain areas, and people had to relocate. And so there was a drop in sales because there were certain businesses who no longer existed, customers who were no longer there. But if you looked in the other areas where, you know, certain cities that people had gravitated to relocate, that's where the sales went. So, you know, he was right that there had been a drop in sales, but he hadn't investigated enough to understand, you know, why it had dropped. And we had all the data. It was just now distributed a little differently than what he had expected.
And that reminds me of my daughter was working in finance during for a brewing company, AB InBev. And in South Africa, they actually paused all the sales. They had no alcohol sales for close on 6 months, or it was most of the year. And when it came to redoing their budgets at the end of the year, the data was just missing. It was gone. So they they really battled to build their budgets for the forthcoming year because they had nothing to go on. Everything was based on the previous year's data. So it was fascinating the pain they went through just because there were no sales. There was somebody else. I was actually, this data trends is quite interesting, and I know there's Dan Steenkamp on there. Could you talk a little bit about your trend breaks that you have here in the table of contents?
Yeah, let me just make sure. Yeah. So that one is in the pandemic chapter.
Okay.
You know, I think, I think the pandemic, there were, you know, a lot of things that happened with data that I say should never have happened. I think people were panicking. They were doing stuff with the data that they shouldn't have been doing. If they had just taken, you know, a breath, they would have, you know, realized what they were doing. but yeah, with the trend breaks, I mean, how many trends did we break during the pandemic?
Right.
You know, hopefully that was something that people learned from.
And it's a pity because Dan Steenkamp is an econometrician, data scientist, and so he also battled during the pandemic. And a lot of the times it was the central bank trying to understand what's going on with the economy. So they really suffered over that time. But he's left, unfortunately. So it's a pity. So there was someone else, I think it was Christo. Christo, I saw you were writing, but then it seems you stopped. Christo, any comments from your side? Oh, yes, Andrew.
Thanks,
Andrew.
Yeah, thanks for taking that question. I was just wondering, have you got any practical advice for us data practitioners, to avoid having the incident that will wind up in a chapter of your next book?
Sorry, what was that?
Have you got any practical advice for us data practitioners to avoid committing a data crime?
Yeah, so what I did in the book, and you'll see a little bit of that on the screen. At the end of every chapter, I put how to prevent crimes in that particular subject area. And then, the last chapter, I kind of did another overall, how do we prevent data crimes? And, some of it is, data management. I mean, we can't just let data manage itself. It's not going to find its way out of a paper bag on its own. we have to understand data management. We have to apply our data management skills to data, and not all companies do that well enough. Communication is always a big one. If there are business rules around how we need to treat data, we can't just keep that to ourselves. We need to share that. We've got people all across company using data. You could say everyone's a data user. Do they understand how they're supposed to be treating the data? And they're not going to figure that out themselves. Communication is a big thing. I've got a few things in there, but one of the last things is think about what you're doing with the data. You're going to retrieve data. First of all, do you understand that you're getting the right set of data that you need? Do you know how to use it properly? Are there any restrictions? Things like privacy, or maybe where it came from. Maybe it came from a vendor. You're only allowed to do certain things with the data. So really think about if you've got the right data, and then what are you trying to achieve with it? Do you have a hypothesis that really makes sense with what you're trying to do?
Well, yeah, very interesting. Yeah, thanks. And in terms of any thoughts around how we should, proactively measure data quality and things like that, because I know it's a never-ending, problem. I mean, we'll never get to the end of it. You can never say we've got it and we've achieved our perfect kind of data quality. I mean, where should we focus our efforts on primarily?
Yeah, I'm actually going to have something more about that. I mean, there's probably a little bit in the second book, but there's probably going to be more in the third book on that. The problem with measuring data quality is, are you measuring the right things? I was talking recently to people about metadata, and how are we measuring that? Saying that every data element has a definition. Is that how we measure the quality of our metadata? And that's probably not a good thing to measure, because then you've got people who say, oh, great, I know how to beat the system. I can just put in a one word. Maybe I can even get away with a space. And, I've met the metric that she's measuring me on. But I think you have to think about, have we got a definition that makes sense? Have we approved it? Does the business realize what we do? And, I think that's, one example of the quality of metadata. And, the same thing goes with any data. Is quality the fact that something exists? We've got some piece of data in that field. Or is the quality that it makes sense? It's consistent with other data. We received it on time. There's maybe 8 different dimensions that I might measure data quality on. So that can get really involved.
Well, thank you.
And Merrill, just an interesting point there is certainly we define our expectations of data quality according to the business use and the purpose. And we go through the process of collecting their definitions, and then in a way automating that on a daily level or whenever the data moves. But one of the desires or things that I keep on sharing with people is trying to be proactive in detecting data quality issues before they happen. So the use of things like SPC, your statistical process control, in terms of monitoring, are things getting worse? Are they getting better? Are we holding on to where we're at? And what's the general direction that we're going on? And I find that to be a very positive approach on trying to get this quality under control. As Andrew says, I don't think we ever will, but it's trying to be proactive.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I say check data quality whenever you receive it or move it.
Right.
So if you can look at it when you receive it or enter it, have we got good data quality? If we don't, let's question, do we even bring it in?
Right.
If you do bring it in, then you have to recognize that you've just introduced some risk.
Yeah.
And then, whenever you move it from from one database to another, or you're putting it on a report, always look at the data quality. So it can be really a huge effort. I don't, I agree. I don't think everyone ever gets there completely, but hopefully you can check at least the majority of places where you think, okay, we're likely to have a problem here because something big is happening, or there's suddenly a production problem one day, and it's like, okay, well, maybe we learned something from that. We can fix that, but maybe that's, a new place where we put a data quality check.
Fantastic. Di, I know you've lived most of your life doing data quality. I thought you'd have a few more questions. No, she's maybe not around. Are there any more questions, Merrill? Again, I'd like to say thank you. Whilst one or two are thinking about a question, thank you so much for the discussion. It was really nice. I really like the approach you've taken to your book. And is it this something that you keep on writing this all the time, and then at some stage you'll bring them all together in a book? Is that a technique that you're using?
Well, with the first book, I originally I was compiling them all in one file.
Right.
Because sometimes I would refer back to it when another crime happened, and I look back and it's like, oh yeah, that one's happened before. I knew about that one already. And so then when I really started putting the book together, at first I just kind of started writing, and then I started counting, and I decided, okay, well, I'm just going to do 101.
Right.
So I kept going until around 80, and then I said, okay, I have to make sure I pick the next ones carefully so I get them in. I mean, there's definitely enough for probably at least another couple books, but I don't know if I would do that, because the stories may be different, but I think the solutions are all the same. Yeah. So I don't know if people would get as much out of it.
Okay.
So that's why with the first book, it was crimes against data.
Yeah.
And then the second one was still stories, but stop the data madness. Some of these things that we just keep doing over and over again, like why? It's not a how-to book exactly, but it does try to organize data management into certain areas and talk about what we're doing in those areas like metadata and data quality, and what maybe we should be doing instead.
Right. So it's almost like if you're to bring all of these stories together, that Ishikawa diagram would start looking quite similar of your core reasons for data quality challenges that you're facing.
I'm not sure about that. But there is a lot in there about data quality. I just, one thing I try to do is I kind of put blinders around each capability.
Right.
Clearly define what data quality is. Do not get it confused with data governance or metadata. So, some of the things I did question, does it belong in this section? Does it belong in that section? But I do try to, put the boundaries around what I'm working on.
Okay, fantastic.
Yeah.
Francesco, anything more from yourself? Is there? Okay, great. Merrill, so the last thing that we need to do before we close is there someone or one of the questions that you feel was the most interesting or the best question that you've been asked? Is there someone that you can pick out in terms of who will win a copy of your book?
Well, there was a question about like the biggest data crime.
Yeah.
Was that Craig?
That was Craig, and that's the one I was going to go for, because that's the one you paused the most to think about.
Yeah. So Craig, do you have a copy of the book yet?
No, not yet. But I'd love to have one. Thank you.
Okay, great. You got it.
Fantastic. Thanks, Craig. I think this is your second book, not so, Craig? I think you're quite good at these questions.